He's a bust candidate in my eyes.
Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, Cooper Kupp is hard to judge. Again, he's another guy that he's 31. He struggled last year. Coming back from his injury from the previous year. Everything I've read and seen is said that he's fully healthy now, so I think that's a good thing. I think we have him exactly where he needs to be. I'm not. You know what? I'm not comfortable saying that he's even gonna bust the. I think he could go either way. There's the potential he could go up, but if anything, I think he's going to be maybe closer to the number 30 range. But I'll keep him at 20, 25. I'm okay with the 25 because it's Cooper Kupp. Because he does have a knack of getting open and stuff, and now that he's healthy, he could pop off. But he's got to deal with Puka, and I know that they've got some other receivers there, and Robinson and Johnson and Atwell. So I mean, they've got guys on there um, that I've read that are doing well too. So for me, if he plays a full season, borderline 1,000 yards, maybe 70 receptions, uh, and possibly between that 5 and 8 touchdown realm. I'm just not convinced until I actually see him in the beginning of the year because I don't think we're going to see him at all in the preseason.
I'm gonna be honest, and this might be like one of the hottest takes anyone's ever heard. I think Cooper Kupp is one of the most overrated wide receivers in the league. Especially when I've looked at his stats recently, this guy has only had like 2 seasons that were actually genuinely good.
Well, he had three. His other there was one season where he was close to 1,000 yards. He only missed it by 26
Yeah,
yards.
but I'm just like sitting here looking at this, and yes, he had a good third season in the league. 3 years ago, he had a good season where he had almost 2,000 yards receiving. But like to me, I don't know. He has been one of the most overhyped receivers, and I guess I didn't really notice it until this year. Do I think last year he could have been a little bit better? Yeah, but like,
He only played 12 games, so
yeah, I don't.
I think 25 is okay right now. I do think that we might have him a little bit
I do.
high.
I honestly, I could.
I think he's probably more closer to the 30, if not
Yeah,
a little bit below, compared to some of the other guys until we see what he does. Um, uh, going into the season, which we won't know.
yeah.
So
I don't know. I think he's super overrated, and now he's old, so it's like one injury and he could just be done type deal, or he just could not come back and be the same. I don't know. I've just thought he's super overhyped. Diontae Johnson.
listen, Wiggs and I have talked about him. Um, I think the best thing that happened for Diontae Johnson was getting traded out of Pittsburgh. I think yes, Johnson only has had one 1,000 yard season. Yes, last year he was dealing with some injuries and he missed 4 games, but he still had 700 yards. So I think I think that Pickens was a huge distraction for him last year. I think Johnson, even though he's 28, I still don't think he takes like that leadership role, um, you know, really well. I think him going to the uh, Panthers was the best thing that could happen to him. I really think that he's going to have um, uh, a breakout year this year. I can really I think with Adam Thielen there and they drafted Leggett, I think Deontay's got a legitimate shot to have a bounce back year from last year. If he stays healthy, he doesn't have to deal. If he's not dealing with anything during the season and he can stay healthy and stay out there, I can see him, having you know, uh, 90, 80 to 90 reception season. Maybe around 11, 1,200 yards. I definitely could see him having, 8 to 10 touchdowns. Especially with Bryce Young there. So just the opposite of what I said with Keenan Allen. I think that Diontae Johnson is one of the receivers where this change of teams is a really, really good thing.
I think his success comes down to how well Bryce Young plays this year. If Bryce is having a good year, I could see him having a really solid season. If Bryce Young doesn't, then I just could see him being somewhere in that 25 to 30 realm, and I think that'd be the best if Bryce is struggling. But
Yeah, well, and here's the thing: the new regime, like we talked about earlier, they brought in more weapons for
oh
for
yeah, they
Bryce
definitely
this
did
year.
with Brooks
So
and
I think that they've tried to surround Bryce with a lot more weapons, and I think they actually did a pretty decent job between the draft
yeah.
and free agency. I think that they filled a lot of key positions on that offense. So I'm kind of excited to see what they do this year.
I will say when Deontay's had a quarterback that is talented and can throw him the ball, for example, Big Ben, back to back years he had 7 and 8 touchdowns, and he averaged 1,000 yards both years. I think as long as his quarterback play is good, he'll be perfectly fine. You look at his last 2 years in Pittsburgh, and that was just a crap show the entire time. Like through three
And
or four different
yeah,
guys, like
and 2022 he still managed 86 receptions and almost 900 yards.
and he's sitting at 30th with no touchdowns. Imagine if he had touchdowns. Like
Right.
that is nuts. I think he went like 400 some days without a touchdown or something like that. It was insane to me.
Yeah, so I view him, I view Deontay as a high end uh, wide receiver 2, low end wide receiver 1. I know some people might think I'm faded for that, as Wiggs would say, but he definitely is in that talk. I think as the year goes on, people are gonna come back and say, "Geez, Papa Wiggs was right."
Unbelievable. Nice. He's on my fantasy team, so I hope you're right. But I don't got faith there. Ooh, this will be the good one. This is where we're gonna take some heat.
Yeah, Stefon Diggs. I get why Houston traded for him. I do. Diggs has been consistent over the last several years. I'm not taking a single thing away from him. I mean, he's been, a fantasy consistent. I mean, he's been over the last 4 years. He's been in the top 4 wide receiver or top 10 wide receivers for fantasy points for PPR. So from 2020 to last year. So you got to give him his kudos there. Here's what I say about this. I do not think he's not even going to get close to 100 receptions this year. I think last year the reason he got the receptions that he did is because, you know, they were really limited in Buffalo with all the targets that they had. I think this year, his production is going to go down. I kind of feel like maybe he's a little bit high on our list. I had him at 26. Wiggs had him at 22. I don't know. I think he's going to be borderline 30 the more and more I see and hear about what's going on there in Houston with their training camp. We'll find out more once the season starts. He is 30. He's getting up there in age. But, I mean, Stroud has got Tank Dell and Nico Collins, Robert Woods, John Michie. I mean, we've already talked about all the receivers, not to mention he's got Schultz as his tight end. You got Mixon coming out of the backfield.
Pearson passing down.
I just think I don't see Diggs having the production that he's had in over the years. Could he get 1,000 yards? Maybe. Okay, I think it's going to be. I don't think he's going to have around 1,200 yards like he did last year and 107 receptions. I see him having maybe 70 receptions and close to 1,000 yards, maybe. But I'll actually see him ending up with between 800 and 900 yards. I think it's really hard to judge because they're going to be spreading the ball around. That's what they've done, you know, um, in uh, Houston with their receivers. I know, not only did I think I forgot Noah Brown. I think that's because he's on the pub, right? Oh wait, no, there he is. Yeah, and plus I got Noah Brown and stuff too. So yeah, so I don't know. I just think that Diggs is going to take a hit this year, and just like I said with Coleman, I think that this was not an ideal place for Diggs to go.
I think Diggs will be fine-ish this year. I don't know how to judge him really. I don't know how to judge anyone in this offense because I think any one of their top three receivers could have a really good year while someone else takes a step back. I'm not fully sold yet on Nico Collins as being their wide receiver one, but I really could see any three of those guys going out and putting up big numbers this year. Like Tank Dell is a beast.
But do you see Diggs get? I mean, over the last 4 years, and the 4 years he was with Buffalo, he averaged over 160 targets.
He's not going to get 160 targets, no, but he's still going to get around 100 targets, if not like 110. Stroud does spread the ball around a lot, but I think if we look here over at Nico Collins, like stats quick, I guess he only had 109, so maybe not even 100 targets, but it's hard to judge because for all we know, like
Well, and
those
Tank Dell had 75, and he was out
Tank Dell
six
was like his
games.
top target. That's why I'm saying I think I could see any one of these three guys being his top target.
I think that I think Diggs' production is going to go down. He's not going to get 100 receptions this year. I do not think he's going to get 100 receptions. Nor do I think he. I really think he's going to struggle to even get 1,000 yards.
Yards and receptions aside, though, he will be a touchdown machine still. He's always been a
I
touchdown
think he I
machine.
think he could get touchdowns. I'm just not convinced he's going to have the same production.
But I don't. This was probably like the harder one for me in this list so far to like rank. Because I mean Stroud showed it last year. He likes to spread the ball around, and to me, it's kind of like a Green Bay situation where you just have too many different targets.
Scroll up and then okay, never mind. Yeah,
So
it'll be interesting.
it will be. I'm not sold, but I'm also not like convinced he's gonna have a 23 type year. But I don't know.
I think any of the guys behind him could do better than him, though,
Devonta Smith.
with a few exceptions. Devontae, you know, he's been consistent in the league. I mean,
He has.
and I think that him and AJ Brown are
They're a great compliment to each other.
they're definitely one of the best duels in the league. I definitely think that Brown or that Smith is going to have a similar year as he did last year. I think he could get. Last year he had 81 receptions for 1,066. He had 7 touchdowns. I could see him doing something similar. And I think that he's definitely going to be pushing the top 20 for sure. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes up. There really wasn't a lot of changes except for Swift going, and then they got Barkley on their offense, and obviously they lost Kelsey at center. But I think he's going to have a similar year than last year.
Yeah, I agree with that. Him and Hurts have always had that connection since back in college. So like I don't see that going away, and I even think the addition to Barkley is not going to impact him much at all. I really don't think Barkley's going to be like utilized like he's used to in the passing game because they've had like Gainwell and they had Swift last year who can receive the ball. Like they don't really utilize their running backs like a whole lot in the passing game. And I think both Smith and Brown will have similar years, if not better years than they did last
Well, and
year.
when they did, they usually brought it wasn't Swift, it was
It was
Gainwell.
Gainwell, yeah.
So
So I don't think the addition of Barkley is really going to impact any of Brown's or
no,
Smith's
no,
production.
I,
So
I I think Smith's going to have a similar year.
yeah, and he could easily be top 20.
Yeah, I definitely think that he definitely has the potential of cracking the top 20. I definitely would consider him a low end wide receiver one, high end wide receiver two. Diggs, same thing. I don't think we talked about that. Low end, I consider low end wide receiver one, a high end wide receiver two.
For me, a lot of these guys are still just high end wide receiver twos right now. once we hit like the top 16, that's
Well,
where.
I just like to state that because I know there's a lot of times where these guys, they may not have an opportunity to get any of the top 20 guys as their wide
Oh
receiver
yeah,
one.
Deebo Samuel.
You know, I like Debo. I think I said this before when we were talking about when we were talking about, or I may have said this to Wiggs. The only thing that concerns me about Debo is the way that Shanahan uses him. I mean, he runs a lot, right? I don't know what his rushing yards were last year, but he runs a lot, and so he takes a lot of hits, just like a running back, which I think is, um, to me, is uh, um, it just it concerns me because I don't think Debo, since he's been in the league, has played every single game. 2021, I think he might have because maybe they went to the playoffs and he sat out the last game. But ever since then, he hasn't played an entire season, and that's because this guy is the center of their offense. And they pass to him, they run to him. So I think if he plays a full year this year, I see him probably having a similar year. I I don't see his Russian stats, so I can't talk about his Russian, but I definitely see him around the 60 reception range and probably around that 900 um, uh, the 900 receiving yards. Um, and last year, I can't. It doesn't even say.
No, I'm trying to find it. If you give me a second.
Well, irregardless, last year I know he had quite a bit of rushing yards. Sorry, we're just trying to figure out where it is, and because these people that do the stats on these receivers, they don't, you know. Oh, so last year he had 37 rushes for 225 yards and 5 touchdowns. So he had a total of 12 touchdowns last year between rushing and receiving. So, I think he's probably going to be similar this year. And he'll be close to that top 20 if he stays healthy. Sorry that I stumbled through that.
Yeah, we're just gonna go with that for now. It's hard to judge him if he's not gonna be on the field healthy. That's all I can really say. I try to sway away from him personally in my leagues just because he's injury prone. I
They're
don't.
not the same offense when he's not in there, though, for sure.
Yeah, I don't personally